Let me be straight with you right now because nobody else is going to say this the way it needs to be said. The biggest wealth transfer in human history is not coming. It has already started right now. Today, while you are watching this video, and the people who are going to end up on the wrong side of it are not the ones who are dumb. They are not lazy. They are not unlucky. They are the ones who were given bad information at the exact moment when good information was worth everything. I have been in business my entire life. I grew up in Pittsburgh in a working-class family where my dad worked at a car upholstery shop and money was always the thing we did not have enough of. I sold garbage bags door to door at age 12. I bartended. I ran a dance lessons business out of my apartment with no real knowledge of how to dance. I started Micro Solutions out of a tiny office and sold it for $6 million. I started Broadcast.com and sold it to Yahoo for $5.7 billion in stock. I bought the Dallas Mavericks when everyone thought I was crazy and turned them into a championship team. I have been on both sides of wealth. I know what it feels like to have nothing, and I know what it feels like to have more than you ever imagined possible. And I am telling you with everything I have learned across 40 years of building, investing, losing, winning, and rebuilding that what is happening right now in the global economy is unlike anything I have ever seen in my lifetime. This is not a market cycle. This is not a recession scare. This is not a political talking point. This is a fundamental restructuring of who owns what in the world, and it happens once in a generation if you are lucky enough to be alive for it. Most people watching this video are going to miss it completely, not because they could not see it coming, but because they chose comfort over clarity at the most expensive possible moment. I am not going to let that happen to you today. Stay with me because what I am about to walk you through is going to change how you see every financial decision you make for the rest of your life. Let me give you the number that started this whole thing for me, and I want you to really sit with it before your brain decides to move on. $400 trillion. That is the estimated total global wealth sitting on this planet right now across all assets, all real estate, all stocks, all businesses, all gold, everything. $400 trillion. And in the next 10 to 15 years, a significant chunk of that wealth is going to move, not disappear. Move from one set of hands to another set of hands, from people who do not understand what is happening to people who do, from people who are playing by the old rules to people who recognize that the rules just changed, from people who are waiting to people who are already moving. I have seen this pattern before in smaller versions throughout my career, and every single time the people who saw it early and acted on it built generational wealth. The people who found out late spent years trying to catch up. So the question I need you to ask yourself right now is not whether this transfer is happening, because it is already happening. The question is, which side of it are you going to be on? There are four massive forces driving this transfer simultaneously, and I need you to understand all four because they are interconnected in ways that most financial commentators are not talking about honestly. The first force is the greatest intergenerational wealth transfer ever recorded in human history. I am talking about the baby boomers. Right now, there are approximately 73 million baby boomers in the United States alone. This generation collectively controls somewhere between $70 and $84 trillion in assets. We are talking about real estate, stock portfolios, businesses, retirement accounts, savings, you name it. And they are aging. Over the next 20 years, roughly $30 to $40 trillion of that wealth is going to transfer down to the next generations. Millennials and Gen Z are going to inherit more money than any generation in human history has ever received. But here is what nobody is telling you about that transfer. It is not going to be equal. It is not going to be fair. And the way that money lands is going to depend almost entirely on financial literacy and positioning. Studies show that 70% of family wealth is lost by the second generation and 90% is lost by the third. The reason is not because the kids are stupid or reckless. The reason is that most people receiving wealth have no framework for what to do with it. They get a lump sum, they feel wealthy for a moment, and then without the right financial infrastructure in place, it bleeds away through bad investments, lifestyle inflation, taxes, and missed opportunities. The families that keep the wealth and build on it are the ones that understand the system. So if you are a millennial watching this right now, the single most important thing you can do before you receive a dollar of inheritance is understand how to deploy capital effectively. Because the window between receiving money and either building it or losing it is shorter than you think. The second force is artificial intelligence, and I know you have heard about AI every single day for the past 2 years, and you are probably tired of hearing about it, but I need you to push through that fatigue for a minute because I am not going to talk about it the way everyone else does. I am not going to tell you AI is going to take your job, although some of it will. I am not going to tell you AI is the greatest invention since electricity, although it might be. I am going to tell you something more specific and more actionable than that. AI is the greatest leverage multiplier in business history, and leverage is how wealth gets created at scale. When I built Broadcast.com, we had a team of people doing things that one person with the right AI tools could do today in a fraction of the time. And here is why that matters for the wealth transfer conversation. The companies and individuals who learn to deploy AI as a leverage tool are going to be able to move faster, operate leaner, generate more output with less capital input, and scale in ways that were physically impossible 10 years ago. A solo entrepreneur with a laptop and the right AI stack today can produce at the level of a 5-person team from 2015. That is not an exaggeration. I have seen it. I have invested in companies doing exactly that. And what happens when the barriers to business creation and scale drop that dramatically? Wealth creation accelerates, but it does not accelerate evenly. It accelerates for the people who learn the tools, and it leaves behind the people who are waiting for someone to explain it to them in simple terms before they try. The digital divide that created wealth inequality in the 90s and 2000s is nothing compared to the AI divide that is opening up right now. And that divide is going to be one of the clearest lines separating winners and losers in this wealth transfer cycle. The third force is something I call the great repricing, and it is happening across every major asset class simultaneously in a way I have not seen before. Real estate, stocks, commodities, private businesses, intellectual property, digital assets, they are all being repriced at the same time based on a fundamental recalibration of what value actually means in an AI-driven, post-pandemic, high-debt global economy. And when everything is being repriced at once, the people with capital and clarity can buy assets at temporarily dislocated prices before the market fully figures out what those assets are worth. This is how fortunes get made, not by picking winners in a stable market, by identifying what is mispriced in a chaotic one. Let me give you one concrete example that I think about constantly. Commercial real estate right now is a disaster in certain categories. Office space in major cities is getting destroyed by remote work trends. But industrial real estate, warehouse space, logistics infrastructure, that same category of real estate is experiencing record demand because e-commerce and supply chain reshoring is accelerating. Same asset class. Completely different story depending on which subset you are looking at. The people who are painting commercial real estate with one broad brush are missing one of the clearest opportunities in the market right now. That is what the great repricing does. It punishes lazy thinking and rewards specific knowledge. And specific knowledge is available to everyone right now if you are willing to do the work to acquire it. The fourth force is the most structural and the least discussed, and I think it is actually the one that ties everything else together. I am talking about the collapse of traditional employment as the primary path to wealth creation. Look, I built my first business because I could not get hired properly out of Indiana University. I went to Pittsburgh and nobody was giving me the opportunities I wanted, so I created my own. And back then that was unusual. Most people went and got jobs and built wealth slowly through savings and retirement accounts over 40 years. That model is not dead, but it is fundamentally broken for the next generation. Wages have not kept up with asset price inflation, which means working a traditional job and saving money in a traditional way is increasingly a path to comfortable poverty rather than wealth. The people who are building real wealth right now are doing it through ownership, not employment. Ownership of businesses, ownership of assets that generate cash flow, ownership of intellectual property, ownership of platforms. The shift from employee mindset to owner mindset is not a motivational speech concept. It is a mathematical necessity in the current economic environment. And the wealth transfer I am describing accelerates that shift because the inheritance money, the AI leverage tools, the great repricing opportunities, all of them are most accessible to people who think like owners. If you are still waiting for an employer to give you a raise that keeps up with inflation, I respect the hustle, but I need you to understand that the system is not designed to let that happen consistently. The design of the current economic system rewards capital over labor every single time, and the only way to be on the right side of that design is to accumulate capital. Now let me talk about something personal because I think the story matters here, and I think too many financial content creators skip the personal reality because they want to seem objective and authoritative. I grew up with nothing, and I want you to understand exactly what that means in terms of how I think about wealth. When I was in high school and college, the concept of investing was completely alien to me. Nobody in my family talked about stocks or real estate or building businesses in a strategic way. My dad worked hard his whole life and he had a decent retirement, but the concept of building multi-generational wealth was not part of the conversation I grew up in. And when I finally started making real money, I made every mistake in the book. I bought things I did not need. I trusted people I should not have trusted. I held on to cash when I should have deployed it and deployed it when I should have held it. The reason I am telling you this is not to make you feel sorry for me because clearly it worked out. I am telling you this because every single mistake I made was a direct result of not understanding the system I was operating in. I was playing a game without knowing the rules, and the rules are not taught in school. They are not covered honestly in mainstream media, and they are not discussed in most households. The people who win the wealth transfer game are the people who figured out the rules early enough to act on them. And that is exactly what we are going to do right now. Let me tell you what the playbook actually looks like for the next decade, because theory without action is just entertainment. The first move is the most important and the most counterintuitive, and I guarantee most of you are not doing it. You need to get radically honest about your current financial reality, not your income, your net worth trajectory. I see people all the time who have good incomes. They feel like they are doing okay, and when you actually map out where their money is going and what their asset base looks like, they are actually moving backwards in real terms because their expenses are growing faster than their investments. The first step in positioning yourself for the wealth transfer is understanding exactly where you stand today. What do you own that is appreciating? What do you owe that is costing you in real terms? What is your money doing while you sleep? Most people cannot answer those three questions clearly, and if you cannot answer them, you cannot make good decisions. So before any investment strategy, before any asset relocation, the foundational step is clarity about your current position. The second move is to build what I call financial leverage infrastructure, and this is where I think most financial advice falls short because it treats investing as a series of individual decisions rather than a system. Real wealth is built through systems, not individual smart moves. The system I am talking about has three components. Skill-based income generation, which means you have at least one skill that produces income independent of any single employer. Cash flow, producing assets, which means you own things that pay you regardless of whether you are working. And optionality capital, which means you maintain a portion of your resources in a position where you can move quickly when opportunities arise. These three things working together create compounding momentum that individual savings or individual investments simply cannot replicate. The baby boomers who are about to transfer wealth built theirs through some version of this system, even if they could not articulate it that clearly. The next generation that captures and builds on that wealth will do it through this system intentionally. The third move is about identifying where the specific repricing opportunities are right now, and I want to give you my honest read on where I see the clearest opportunities. Small and medium-sized private businesses are one of the most underappreciated wealth creation vehicles in the current environment. There are millions of baby boomer business owners who built solid cash flowing companies over decades and who have no succession plan because their kids do not want to take over, and the private equity buyers are only interested in the very large deals. I'm not profiting up startups, clients or happy about business skins. I'm called to acquire printing, capiting doing business driving raisins. I am not talking about startups. I am not talking about venture style swings. I am talking about a printing company doing $2 million a year in revenue, a plumbing business, a regional logistics company, businesses that are not glamorous but are profitable and stable and whose owners need an exit. This is where some of the quietest wealth creation of the next decade is going to happen, and almost nobody is talking about it in a serious way because it does not make for exciting social media content. But I promise you the people who figure this out are going to look back in 10 years and realize they found one of the clearest opportunities of their lifetime sitting right in front of them. The fourth move, and I say this knowing it sounds basic, is to take AI seriously as a personal leverage tool, not just as a macro trend to observe. I invest in AI companies. I have seen the internal capabilities of dozens of AI platforms at various stages of development. And the gap between what these tools can do and what the average person is using them for is enormous. Most people use AI as a search engine replacement or a writing assistant. The people who are building real leverage with these tools are using them to compress the time required to develop domain expertise, to automate the operational components of businesses, to analyze market data and identify patterns at a scale that was previously only accessible to well-funded institutions. This is a real democratization of capability, and it is happening right now. The window during which these tools give early adopters a significant advantage over the mainstream is closing faster than most people realize. Get specific about which AI tools matter for your specific domain and get genuinely good at using them. This is not optional if you want to compete in the next decade. Now I want to address the people watching this who are thinking, yes, this all makes sense, but I do not have capital to work with. I hear you and I want to be direct about it. I started with nothing. I genuinely had nothing. I know what it feels like to be smart and motivated and broke simultaneously. And the honest truth is that starting from zero in the current environment is harder than it was when I started in the 1980s in certain ways and easier in others. It is harder because asset prices are higher relative to incomes than they were then. It is harder because student debt burdens are crushing the early wealth building capacity of millions of smart people. It is harder because the cost of living in major urban centers has grown faster than wages for 2 decades. Those are real structural challenges, and I am not going to minimize them, but it is also dramatically easier than when I started in one critical way. The cost of starting a business and the access to markets has never been lower in human history. When I started MicroSolutions, I had to rent office space and buy servers and hire people before I could serve a single client. Today, you can start a software business, a content business, a consulting practice, a product company with a few $100s and a laptop. The barrier to creating your first dollar of business income, and from there your first ownership stake in something has never been lower. If you are starting from zero, the path is not to try to invest your way to wealth on a small income. The path is to build a business, even a small one, and use the ownership of that business as the foundation for everything that comes after. That is the modern version of what my dad's generation did with a union job and a savings account. Different form, same principle. Create a stable ownership position and build from there. Let me talk about the mistakes I see most often, because I think sometimes the clearest path forward is understanding what not to do first. Mistake number 1 is lifestyle inflation outpacing wealth building. This is the silent killer of financial potential, and it is happening at epidemic proportions. I see people whose income went from $50,000 a year to $150,000 a year, and their net worth barely moved because every income increase got immediately absorbed by a nicer apartment, a leased car, better vacations, and a lifestyle that feels earned, but is actually financially paralyzing. I am not saying do not enjoy your money. I enjoy my money. But there is a critical difference between spending money on experiences and things that genuinely improve your life and spending money to maintain an image of success that is actually preventing you from building real success. The rule I have always used is that your wealth building rate has to grow faster than your lifestyle. If both are growing but wealth is growing faster, you will be okay. If lifestyle is growing faster than wealth, you are on a treadmill that gets harder to get off every year. Mistake number 2 is chasing financial trends without understanding the underlying fundamentals. I saw this happen with crypto in 2021. I saw it happen with meme stocks. I see it happening with certain AI stocks right now where valuations have run so far ahead of fundamentals that they are pricing in a future that may or may not materialize in the time frame the market is assuming. I am not anti-crypto. I am not anti any of these categories as concepts. But there is a critical difference between investing in something because you understand the fundamental value creation mechanism and buying something because everyone on social media is talking about it and you do not want to miss out. The wealth transfer cycle I am describing rewards understanding. It punishes momentum chasing. The single most expensive financial mistake I see smart people make is buying an asset they cannot explain in simple terms because they heard about it from someone whose primary credential is that they made money buying it before you found out about it. Mistake number 3 is paralysis through overanalysis. I know smart people who have been researching the perfect investment strategy for 5 years and their money is still sitting in a savings account. And I understand the impulse completely. When the stakes feel high and the information is complex and the downside feels catastrophic, it is genuinely hard to pull the trigger on any decision. But here is what I have learned from 40 years of making consequential financial decisions. A good decision made today beats a perfect decision made 2 years from now every single time because the cost of waiting compounds just like the benefit of good decisions compounds. You do not need to have everything figured out before you start. You need to understand enough to take a first step that is directionally correct and then learn and adjust as you go. That is how every business I ever built actually got built, not from a perfect plan executed flawlessly, from a reasonable starting point iterated rapidly based on what was actually happening in the real world. Mistake number 4 is trusting the wrong information sources, and I say this with full awareness that I am a source of information right now, so you should apply this to me too. The financial media ecosystem has a fundamental misalignment of incentives. Media companies make money from attention, and attention is generated by drama, by fear, by the feeling that something huge is about to happen either up or down. That incentive structure means the information that gets amplified loudest is often the information that is most emotionally charged rather than most analytically accurate. The best investors I know read widely, they cross-reference everything, they are deeply skeptical of any narrative that is too clean and too certain, and they have developed their own frameworks for evaluating information rather than just consuming other people's conclusions. Building that analytical independence is hard and it takes time, but it is one of the most valuable investments you can make in your own financial capacity because it compounds for the rest of your life. I want to take a step back here and talk about something that I think is fundamental to the wealth transfer conversation, but that almost never gets discussed in financial content. The psychological component of wealth building, because here is the dirty secret that nobody wants to admit. Most people who fail to build wealth in a favorable environment are not failing because of a lack of information or a lack of opportunity. They are failing because of a set of psychological patterns around money that were installed in them long before they were adults and that they have never consciously examined. Fear around risk that prevents them from ever deploying capital effectively. A scarcity mindset that makes every financial decision feel like a threat rather than an opportunity. A complicated emotional relationship with money that was shaped by how their parents talked about money or did not talk about money. An identity that is not compatible with being wealthy because somewhere along the way the idea of being wealthy got associated with being something they do not want to be. I grew up in a household where wealth was seen as something that happened to other people, where talking about money was kind of uncomfortable, where the idea of wanting to be rich felt somehow at odds with being a good working class person. And I had to consciously dismantle a lot of that programming before I could build effectively. The work of understanding your own psychological relationship with money is not soft self-help stuff. It is a prerequisite for making clear financial decisions under pressure, because the moments that matter most in wealth building are almost always high-stress, high-pressure moments, and under those conditions, the psychological patterns you have not examined come roaring back with enormous force. Let me get very specific about what the next 5 years look like, because I think the strategic timing matters, and I want to give you my honest read on the window we are in. We are in what I believe is a transitional compression period between two major economic cycles. The post-pandemic inflation cycle is winding down, but the structural debt and monetary policy challenges I mentioned earlier are creating a new kind of uncertainty that the standard playbooks do not account for cleanly. AI disruption is accelerating faster than most institutional investors have fully priced in, which means certain sectors are still significantly mispriced both to the upside and the downside. The intergenerational wealth transfer is just beginning to accelerate in terms of actual capital movement, and the secondary effects of that movement on various asset classes have not fully materialized yet. And small business ownership opportunities are at historically favorable levels for buyers because of the boomer succession problem I described earlier. What this adds up to is a window of roughly 3 to 5 years where the combination of these factors creates asymmetric opportunity for informed, prepared people. Not everyone, not automatically, but for people who understand what is happening, who have built the financial infrastructure I described, and who are positioned to move with conviction when the specific opportunities present themselves. This window is not going to be open forever. Markets adapt. Information spreads, prices adjust. The people who act in the next 3 to 5 years based on a clear understanding of these dynamics are going to look back at this period the way people who bought real estate in 2012 or started tech businesses in 1994 look back at their moment. Like it was obvious in retrospect, and like they cannot believe more people did not see it. Here is my challenge to you, and I want you to actually do this, not just think about it, actually do it within the next 48 hours. I want you to calculate your real net worth trajectory, not your current net worth, but the direction and speed it is moving in real purchasing power terms. Take everything you own that is appreciating and map the rate. Take everything you owe and map the cost. And then honestly assess whether the gap between those two numbers is growing in your favor or growing against you. I would bet that for a significant portion of the people watching this video, that calculation is going to produce an uncomfortable result. Not because they are doing anything dramatically wrong, but because they have never actually done the math clearly. And uncomfortable clarity is worth infinitely more than comfortable vagueness when you are trying to make good decisions about your financial future. Then I want you to identify one specific area where you have or could develop genuine domain expertise that gives you an informational edge over the average investor. Not a tip you read somewhere, not a trend you heard about, something you actually understand at a deeper level than most people because of your professional experience, your personal interests, your geographic location, your professional network. Every person watching this video has at least one area like this. The doctor who understands healthcare industry dynamics at a level that no financial analyst who has never been inside a hospital does. The teacher who understands the education technology market at a ground level. The construction worker who understands the real state of the housing supply in their local market. The logistics professional who sees supply chain trends before they show up in any quarterly report. Your domain expertise is a financial asset, and most people never use it as one because they have been taught to separate their professional knowledge from their investment decisions. Stop separating them. Your edge is there. Use it. Finally, I want you to do one thing that most people find uncomfortable, and that is to have one completely honest conversation with someone in your life about the actual state of your financial position and your financial goals. Not a brag session, not a complaint session, an honest, clear-eyed look at where you are and where you need to go with someone who can hold you accountable. The research on wealth building is remarkably consistent on this point. The single biggest differentiator between people who execute on financial plans and people who do not is not intelligence, it is not opportunity, it is not even initial capital, it is accountability. Humans are wildly better at following through on commitments they have made to other people than commitments they have only made to themselves. Find your accountability partner for this process. It might be a spouse or a partner, it might be a friend. It might be a financial advisor if you find the right one, but the conversation needs to happen in the real world with a real person, because that is how you take this from being a video you watched to being a change you actually made. The biggest wealth transfer in history has begun. The forces driving it are real and documented and accelerating. The opportunities are specific and identifiable and accessible to people who are informed and positioned. The mistakes that will cost people are predictable and avoidable. You now have a framework for understanding what is happening and a set of specific actions you can take to be on the right side of it. The only question is the same question it always is. What are you going to do with what you just learned? Because I have been in business long enough to know that the distance between where most people are and where they could be is not money. It is not connections. It is not talent. It is the decision to stop waiting and start moving. The machine is running. The transfer is happening. The window is open. Get off the sideline. I will see you in the next one.